Welcome to the Good Growing Podcast. I am Chris Enroth, horticulture educator at the University of Illinois Extension, coming at you from Galesburg, Illinois, in a different locale. That's where I am currently. But we are going today be talking about a festive plant. We are going to be decking the halls with this particular plant, with boughs of it. And what exactly is a bough? Well, we will find out today. And you know I'm not doing this by myself. I'm joined, as always, every single week by horticulture educator Ken Johnson in Jacksonville. Hey, Ken.
Hello, Chris. Get excited. 'Tis the season.
Your favorite season. Ken loves this time of year.
We got lots of snow. Our holly is standing out nicely in the
Hmm.
nice white landscape. It's all good.
Yes. Yes. We're diving into the magical world of holly today. The genus is Ilex, Ilex. So there's a lot to cover here. You know, this is more than just a spiky, thorny, red-berried little plant. There is a little bit here that we need to cover. Um, and I do like this plant. I know Ken, you like this plant, right? You have a few of these in your yard, so um, we'll we'll
I
cover the
do.
gamut.
Yes. Cover the there. Yeah, like you said, I think people usually think of, what we traditionally see at Christmas. What was there, like 800 evergreen species and 30 species of deciduous hollies in the world? So
Hmm.
there's a whole lot out there.
Yes. And I'm enamored with some of these, and so I'm excited to get to a few species in particular. So, but in terms of the whole history with holly, I know it's really tied closely to like the holiday season. Um, and actually, there was a trivia question we just had at one of our meetings, and it was talking about how holly is tied to something like everlasting life and because it's evergreen and sort of that hope for the end of winter back into the growing season. And so, but yeah, there's a whole history to this in terms of how it was used in different cultures that before us, just like how when we talked about mistletoe and how that was used by the old Druid tribes um, and so Ken, what history can you unveil with holly for this year?
Yeah, so druids also play a role in this year's history as well. So with druids, they believe the sun never sets or never deserted holly. So therefore, they consider it also considered a holy or a sacred plant. So they would decorate the inside of their dwellings, their homes with it, which so then the woodland spirits could then take refuge in them and rest from the rigors of winter, and then those spirits would then be kind to them throughout the year. So for that, and then we move into ancient Romans. Holly was used to honor the god Saturn, god of agriculture, during the Saturnalia festival, which was during the winter solstice. And Romans would give holly wreaths or other holly things to one another. There'd be processions with images of Saturn adorned with holly and stuff. And because of this, during early Christianity, Christians would also decorate their homes with holly to avoid persecution, and that kind of then morphed into decorations for Christmas time as kind of Christianity became the dominant religion in the Roman Empire. So it's tied into this holiday season, the end of the year, December, in a lot of different cultures, not just kind of that Christian culture.
You know, Ken, I don't know why, but every time we played games as a kid, you know, people would be a wizard, a mage, sorcerer, a warrior. I always chose druid. Druid's where it's at. It's where it all starts, whether you're talking mistletoe or holly. Um, and that is really interesting that transition from the worship of the god Saturn at the Saturnalia festival to now then adorning the homes of Christian families. So interesting. And still to this day, we use holly as decorative greenery. We see quite a bit of that sold in stores, usually fake holly, because that fake holly, it's not as pokey as the real stuff. So we are going to cover all the different types of holly, from the evergreen pokey holly to the smooth leaf deciduous hollies. If there ever were such a thing, there is, and they're neat. And so from ancient times to today, growing these plants, Ken, you said 800 plus species probably around the world of Ilex, of holly. And so the growing conditions are going to be wide and varied. But let's speak generally here for a second. We are going to be planting our hollies in a moist, well-drained soil. Um, Now, I say that's like every plant. That's a good description for everybody, practically. But yes, moist, well-drained soils, and you want it to be acidic to slightly acidic soils. And that's just like it's like the perfect soil for plants, at least where I'm concerned. Ken, we're in Illinois, and pretty much we just described our soils almost. We are rather flat, so drainage can be an issue in some spots, but we have a slightly acidic soil. We're pretty well drained in most spots. And in a typical year, we get adequate rainfall for growing almost anything. You can grow anything here in Illinois. So Illinois soils are well adapted to growing hollies. Um, but for the evergreens, this the thing that I see most in terms of like winter damage, first there's like the sun scald that happens on deciduous trees like thin bark maples. That's very common. But then probably the second most common winter damage I see is on broadleaf evergreen plants like our hollies, like our boxwoods, and that is winter burn, from being desiccated from the winter winds. And because when the soil is frozen, that's essentially like a drought for these holly plants. So they can't take up that soil moisture to replace that water being pulled out of the leaves during the winter with the winds and such. So we do want to make sure that we're sheltering our evergreen hollies in a nice location that is maybe out of the prevailing wind section of our homes. So they don't make great windbreaks.
Or be ready to have some damage to your leaves. They may not look
Yeah,
as pretty as they could otherwise.
right,
Um,
right.
and like for sun exposure, I think most hollies are your full sun, they can tolerate some shade, but the more shade you get them, a lot of times, the less fruiting you're going to have.
Hmm.
So depending on how important that is to you, you may want to consider that. And some species, especially the ones that don't really like hot, humid weather, a lot of times afternoon shade would be beneficial for them. So it's kind of kind of depends on the plant a little bit.
That's true. Yeah. Well, and I think the thing that when I was, doing a little bit more reading for this particular episode, there seems to be a factoid about holly that people love to say. I mean, it comes up, it's like right off the bat. Everything's like, do you know that these plants are dioecious? And everyone's like, ooh, what's that? Then they're like, that's Greek, uh, which means two houses. And so I will admit it. Whenever I'm talking about hollies, I also get pretty excited about that little factoid and sounding really fancy and smart. But yes, hollies are dioecious, which means that two houses means that the male plant is a separate plant than the female plant. So male flowers on one, female flowers on the other. Essentially, what we're talking about is pollen on one, and then the fruit on the other. And so you need to have the male present in order to pollinate the female flowers to get your berries. Now, the opposite of that is monoecious, and that is one house. So male, female flowers, they live in one house or on one plant. So see how I did that, Ken? Yeah, I was so excited to give my dioecious spiel.
Yeah, and with that, so it's important when you're buying these, you get your male and your female plant because if you get all females or all males, you're not getting berries. And again, it's going to depend on the species, but typically one male plant per for every 3 to 10 female plants, but it's going to vary. Some species you may need a 1 to 1, one male plant for one female. Some can be one male plant for 10 female plants. And you also need to sync up, make sure the blooming time is synced and they can pollinate each other. So a lot of times, when you're buying hollies, like mail order and stuff, a lot of times you can buy them as a set. So
Mhm.
when I bought the hollies we have, I think it was 5 female plants for one, and you got one male plant with it. And then you could buy the female plants individually or the male plants individually, but you get a set. So you have that the pollinator for your female plants, and you have to have it relatively close. It doesn't have to necessarily be right next to it, but I think usually it's within 100, 200 feet or so, just so the bees that are, or insects that are pollinating it can get back and forth to the plants.
Yeah. And this is a good time, I say, where I'll often recommend, if you're interested more in purchasing hollies and you really want to have those red berries for the wintertime, um, probably be a good idea to go to maybe a reputable nursery. You could probably go to a big box store, and I'm sure everyone listening here, you know what you're doing, and you can find the male and female holly. But if you do have questions, go into that reputable nursery. You can find that grower there who can help direct you, making sure that you're purchasing that female and male holly together with that bloom time. Ken, I know when you purchased yours, oftentimes the female holly has one name and then the male holly has a very similar type name. They were bred to basically correspond with their bloom time so we could get red berries in the fall. And I would just say, you might get better information there at that local nursery dealer, as opposed to the big box store with the high school student, which I tried to do that in high school and they wouldn't hire me. So said I was couldn't work in the nursery center. I
It's bitter.
was bitter. Never went there again. So yeah, check out your local nursery dealers because you do have these different bloom times. You can generally say you have an early bloom period hollies and you have later season blooming hollies. Yeah, you just want to match those up as best you can. So they can overlap in some cases, but um, yeah, you want to make sure you're matching your bloom cycles.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest reason why when people grow holly is that they don't have fruit. Either they don't have a male to go with them or something got mislabeled. Well, I guess that
Mm,
still wouldn't have a male, but they bought a male, but it got mislabeled or something like that. So if you're not getting berries when it blooms, check those flowers and see if it's you have a male or female plant.
yeah. The and the male flowers, they'll have the pollen tubes, not pollen tubes. What are they called? Stigmas.
Stamen, stamens.
Stamens, yes. Um, I'm a professional, folks. They will have stamens. Um, the female flowers, they'll have like a kind of a ball shaped structure in the middle. That's going to become the berry in the future. The female flowers can produce false stamens, though. I think that kind of tricks the pollinators to come in and visit them. But so keep an eye out for that. But the males aren't going to have the that center disc in there what that will become the berry in the future. So yeah, take your magnifying glass out and take a look at those flowers.
Yes.
Well, Ken, I think another common question with our hollies comes with pruning. Now, a lot of us prune them this time of year. We want to take cuttings of them maybe into our homes with the berries on it, with the evergreen foliage. And so you're doing some research before the show and notice some inconsistent information in terms of like when do things bloom, like on what type of wood, like last year's wood, this year's wood. Um, so did you get any conclusive information about bloom time and pruning?
So it will depend on the species as to whether or not it's going to bloom on old wood or new wood. So some of the old woods would be Ilex aquifolium, which is the English holly. Cornuta, what is that, Chinese holly?
Hmm.
I should have wrote out the common names first. Uh, Vomitoria, which is an awesome name. That's the Yapen holly,
Wow.
which I don't think we could grow up here. But those are going to bloom on old wood and then on new wood. So that current season's growth, opaca, which is American holly,
Hmm.
uh, glabra, which is inkberry, and then winterberry. Depends on where you read. Some places say new wood. Most places will say old wood. And I do have this holly book that I bought several years ago. I don't know why. It was at a used bookstore, but it finally came in handy. I think I even bought it before I started working for Extension. But it lists, um, it says that deciduous hollies bloom on old wood. So I am leaning towards like Winterberry being old wood, but there's some places say new. So I'm not,
Yeah.
it has me doubting what's actually going on.
If you pin me in a corner, Ken, I would say it would they bloom on old wood because we had a Winterberry where I was growing up, and I remember it blooming early in the spring. Um, and that there just wouldn't have been enough time for new wood to develop unless, boy, that holly's growing in the dead of winter, but I don't think so. Um, so yeah, I pin me to the corner. That's what I would say. But also, I think that's interesting that young Ken Johnson knew that we were going to be doing a podcast episode about hollies. So way to go on buying that book. Like what, 12 years ago, 13, 15 years
I'm
ago?
not sure when it was, but yes, it's been sitting on the bookshelf for a while. And I finally had the, I guess the nudge I needed to actually look at it.
Nice. Time to get it used up. There you go. Excellent. Excellent. Um, well, I think we've covered kind of maybe the general basics of holly growing. Should we dive into specific species now?
I think that sounds like a good plan.
Excellent. Well, we have divided these hollies into groups because boy, don't we love doing that. So we are going to start with our rounded leaved evergreen holly. Now, these are ones that are very often considered like substitutions for boxwood. Boxwood, by the way, is one of the number one like industry leading nursery plant that's sold. Everyone pretty much has a boxwood somewhere in their yard. I know I do, even though I didn't plant it. I have it. I've even dug boxwoods up trying to kill them, and I tossed them in the backyard. They're still alive. So they're a tough plant, but they don't really offer much other than evergreen always. Um, Hollies offer a little bit more. We get our red berries and we can get some interest. I mean, very small, minimal flowers, but you can see them when you look closely, and they're very attractive to pollinators. So the first one that we're going to talk about, this is one that I first found when I was a young lad, a student down at SIU Carbondale. Inkberry holly, also known as gallberry. This is Ilex glabra. And I recall being on campus down there, and they had a Japanese garden. It was designed by the landscape design course class there a few years before I got there. And I remember along the path there being a cluster of inkberry hollies, and I just absolutely loved that plant. There was a bench sitting right there, and I would sit there. I'd do work. I'd read the Daily Egyptian. I spent a lot of time sitting next to that Ilex glabra, and it formed kind of like a nice little colony. Had suckers coming up from the root system, and it was a bit more leggy than a boxwood. I'd say a little bit taller, maybe not as sparse maybe not as dense in terms of the foliage. It was more sparse, definitely less leaves towards the bottom. But still, it was just a different look, a different texture than boxwood. And so I was really, really interested in this plant. It did form these kind of inky, dark fruits towards the later half of the season. And it held on to them, held on to the leaves. And I just found it quite interesting. Now, you could find this plant growing all the way from like the southern Gulf Coast states all the way up to Maine. I didn't see Illinois though listed as a part of its native range. I just looked at one spot though, and it wasn't the USDA site, but I did not see Illinois listed in its native range. But it grows here just fine, and it's absolutely a fun plant. I really like it.
Yeah, I think there are some cultivars that are out there that are a little more maybe compact, a little more dense, that may be a
Mhm.
little closer to a boxwood if you really want that to be a kind of a one-to-one substitute.
Yeah. Yep. And of course, that's what the industry, that's what they want to do. They're trying to make, what could be the next boxwood, um, while still maybe providing a little bit of habitat value, and maybe even as the industry girds itself for potentially more boxwood blight around the corner, which is a, a near fatal disease for boxwoods. I would say almost. uh, I don't. Well, we need a pathologist here, but a guaranteed fatal disease for boxwoods. But um, I'll leave that one to you, Ken. I don't know how bad boxwood blight is.
I don't know if it's 100%, but it's causing lots of problems.
Yeah,
Put it
yeah.
that way.
That's why they're looking for substitutes. Yeah. So yeah, Inkberry holly. I'd suggest people check it out. I know it was growing in Southern Illinois, of course, way back when. Um, with the change in our USDA hardiness zones, like now, like central, like Jacksonville, where you're at, you now have the Southern Illinois winter that I was accustomed to way back then. So, you could probably be okay with this plant in your neck of the woods, Ken.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I've seen or here. Zones 4 to 9 is what I tell
Okay.
you too. So,
Yeah.
yep,
So we
I'll
should
look
be good.
over.
Yeah. Just watch that winter burn on it. Yeah. Oh, the other thing that you can do with Inkberry is that you can brew a tea, and it is common enough that it has its own name. It's called Appalachian tea, made from the leaves of the holly, the Inkberry holly. Probably a very important thing for us to mention right now. The berries of hollies, while you might see other animals eating them, humans do not eat these. They are toxic to us. Um, and, while you eating a few might give you an upset stomach and you won't feel good, eat several more and then you'll definitely have some hospital bills that you don't want to have to deal with. So leave the berries alone, leave them for the birds.
And some, I guess it's not useless, but random trivia for you here. They're not actually berries. They're
Ah,
drupes.
yes.
So drupes have that hard endocarp or the part next to the seed, like the
Hmm.
pit of a peach. So berries have fleshy endocarp. So technically they're drupes, even though we call them berries.
Hmm. True. Yes.
But we're going to keep calling them berries.
Because we can't help it. Oh, well, we do have one more of our rounded leaf evergreen holly, and that's going to be Ilex crenata, or crenata. This is known as Japanese holly. It's also known as boxwood holly. So this one probably more closely resembles boxwood kind of growth habit than, say, inkberry right off the bat. This is one where, follows all what we've talked about with hollies in terms of where we plant it, you know, part sun, full sun, moist, well-drained soil, slightly acidic. Um, I will say, even with inkberry, the Ilex crenata, or the Japanese holly, does do. I think it does okay in the shade. I've seen it growing underneath kind of smaller trees like fringe tree and things like that, and it looks pretty nice. It's a little bit shorter stature. I mean, the kind of the wild species gets 5 to 10 foot tall, but of course, there's cultivars that are smaller than that. Um, and then anything 5 to 8 foot wide. Um, I I do think our hollies, they can grow a little bit kind of wide, like kind of a more I was like cumbersome might be the wrong word, but yeah, a little bit more wide and gangly sometimes, depending upon the cultivar. You might have a really nice tight dwarf type cultivar that doesn't do stuff like that. Um, the other thing about hollies, kind of general, but especially with this boxwood holly, is that they are tolerant of a lot of lousy clay soil conditions and urban kind of pollution tolerant conditions as well. So they do make really good like urban landscape plants. Um, and the fruits for this holly, they are small. They're dark in color, kind of dark blue, black color. Um, they are drupes, not berries, but we do call them berries. And like most hollies, these are going to ripen in the fall.
And you mentioned them getting wide. If you're growing them as a hedge, at least according to my holly book, they're blooming on new wood as is the inkberry. So if you're having to prune these back in the spring, you're not
Hmm.
necessarily removing flowers as long as you're not doing it too late. So you can do some probably a little more shaping of them,
Yeah.
or probably a little more forgiving for shaping when it comes to berries because you're usually a lot of times pruning that in the spring for that.
Hmm.
So
I I do have a holly bush, and it is by I think the former owners put it there to mask the air conditioning unit outside, and so I pretty much have to routinely prune this to keep it away from the that heat pump AC unit outside and keep it away from the house, kind of train it, direct its growth. I've always, but I hand prune, I guess, I'm not shearing, I'm not doing any of that. So yeah, never had an issue. All right. Well, Ken, this next section, I think this is for you. Like this is your this is your jam here. The rounded leaf, so not spiky, but they're deciduous. It's like these plants don't read the books. They don't know they're supposed to be evergreen. Um, can you tell us a little bit about some of these deciduous hollies?
yeah, so the first one we've got Ilex decidua or Possumhaw. So this is another. This is a native species. I believe it is native to Illinois. It's going to be. It's pretty tolerant of a lot of different soil conditions. So it can have handle those heavier soils like we have in a lot of Illinois. Maybe a little bit wetter conditions than some of the other hollies that are out there as well. So maybe a little more adaptable than some of the others. It can also sucker and can form colonies. So depending on where you're putting it and the size of your yard, maybe the straight species isn't something you want. But if you got a lot of room, that may be something you look at. It's kind of an upright shrub with a spreading rounded crown. So maybe kind of think of it like upside down triangle or point at
Hmm.
the bottom. So it's flaring out. The top can be 7 to 15 feet tall. Kind of that straight species, maybe a little bit taller. Again, there are cultivars that are smaller that are out there. Berries are kind of a reddish orange. And again, cultivars out there that have more orange berries or drupes, what have you. So there can be some different fruit colors as well, or more red. I believe this is one where you want a little more of a more one-to-one male to female ratio there, a little bit lower ratio than some of these others. So keep that in mind if you're going to be planting this kind of a widespread. And this is zone 5 through 9, so it can go throughout the state.
Yeah. This one grew a lot um in in Southern Illinois. We saw this quite a bit like with our woody plant ID class, Possumhaw. Also, excellent name for a plant. Yeah. It's one of my favorite ones to say out loud. We had a Carolinian professor with a real Southern draw, and he loved this name as well. Hmm.
And then the other one that we'll talk about today is Ilex verticilata or Winterberry. This is the one we have in our yard. We have the cultivar Barry Poppins. And Mr. Poppins, like you said, a lot of times the names are similar. Mr. Poppins is the male cultivar for that. So this is another native species. Again, they can tolerate a little more wet conditions better than some of the other hollies that are out there. And a lot of times, this one you find a lot of times in more kind of swampy areas of eastern North America. Maybe not directly in the swamp, but close to it, where you still have these wetter soil conditions for it. Again, upright, kind of rounded habit, 3 to 12 feet tall. So you have this big variation there. This will also sucker and it can form thickets. I will say the cultivated type we have is not sending up a whole lot of suckers, maybe a few here and there. So probably not nearly as much as you would the straight species. And for like the berry poppins, what was that? That's 3 to 4 ish feet tall. So that's the reason we got it so much shorter. We've got it in front of our porch. We didn't want it covering all that up. And they've got these really bright red, pretty drupes berries on them. And I can throw a picture of that in. And now that we've had all this snow, it really kind of pops
Hmm.
in the
Ah.
landscape when we get snow. So, and then this is a zone 3 through 9. So again, we've got the whole state uh, that's covered here.
Mhm. The Ken's your Berry Poppins is so cute. He's shared pictures of it with me before, and I love this plant. I don't know why I don't have it in my yard, um, but I think I also understand why people want more of these dwarf types because I want all of these native plants in my yard, but they're not all going to fit. So I need to get smaller versions of them so that they'll all fit. It all makes perfect sense to me. So Berry Poppins is very adorable little Winterberry holly.
Yeah, and there's quite a few. I think this one's gonna had a lot of breeding done with it. There's a lot of different cultivars out there. Jim Dandy is probably one of the more
Mhm.
common pollinating male cultivars of this. So that's probably one you would probably encounter quite a bit if you're looking for winterberries.
Yeah. The other thing I see a lot of that Winterberry is used in is rain gardens. And so you had mentioned very tolerant of wet soils. And so this would be one of those if you need a little bit more structure in your rain garden planting palette, it's not all herbaceous plants. Maybe if you need a little bit of like, woody plant structure in a rain garden, this would be one of those that, I think would be well adapted to those types of conditions that you would encounter in like a rain garden.
Yes,
So we need more deciduous hollies in the landscape. I can't
yes.
wait to go get mine. These shows that we do, Ken, where we're like going through these plants, I'm just like, I just want them all. So
Need to win the lottery so I can buy
yes,
some acreage and just start planting everything.
this will be the good growing arboretum. Well, until we get there, let's move on to our next grouping of plants. And this is going to be the classic spiky evergreen foliage. Um, and the first one we have here is Ilex meserve or meserve. I don't know how to say it, but it is a cross of what is it a cross of? It's the English holly and the Asian holly, rugosa and aquifolium. And I don't, I'm not as familiar with this one. I have seen it in the nursery and I've seen a lot of it in like plant catalogs because this is the holly that has the bluish tint to its foliage. And I think it is very popular in a lot of different landscapes, a lot of gardens. And that bluish tint really seems to sell this particular species. It does get the red berries. With all of its cultivars, you'll even get different coloration of foliage. And even with previous ones we mentioned and ones that we'll mention, there's a lot of variegated types also out there. So you'll see a lot of creams and whites and things streak through that foliage color. But it's a cross, it's a hybridization of the English holly and the East Asian holly, rugosa. It will grow 3 to 8 foot tall, about 6 to 8 foot wide. So again, it still gets pretty wide. Um, Occasionally can reach up to 15 foot tall. And I would say, depending upon the cultivar that you buy, you can get various habits, which ranges anything from like, columnar, vase-shaped, rounded. Um, and I think this particular one, if I'm remembering correctly, this is the slowest of all of the holly growth rates. Um, uh, I might be making that one up, but I know it's a slow grower. Um, it might be one of the slowest ones. So if you want a big plant that's not going to do much for several years, think possibly this blue holly right here. For this one, you do need a male for every 3 to 5 plants. The one that you're going to be looking for, the name of that male cultivar is going to be Blue Prince, um, and they're sold as that pollinizing plant.
Yeah, a lot of the female, well, a lot of male and female have blue names. So
Mhm.
blueprints, blue boy, blue girl, blue princess, and stuff. Yeah, there's a bunch of different cultivars. Just looking at a list of some. Golden girl, mezgold. I don't know if I said that right. Has yellow fruit. So even get into different fruit colors there as well.
I think one where you might have a look-alike, and that's going to be Oregon grape holly, which is not actually a holly at all. It's a Mahonia, but it has also a bluish tint to the foliage, and it is awful. I do not like this plant. Um, talk about spiky. If you think hollies are spiky, Mahonia, that's spiky. But they have very similar looking foliage. And I think, yeah, I've seen that Oregon grape holly very similar looking to the blue holly. Well, Ken, this next one, I mean, it's the holly. It is the one that all the songs are written about, all the lore that you described there at the beginning. Um, it is the traditional English holly, Ilex aquifolium. Um, what you already talked about the history of this plant. What else can we say about it?
So the English holly, like I said, that's the one we traditionally think of as Christmas. Hardy to zone 7, so maybe it can grow in some parts of Illinois, but it does not like hot, humid weather. So when you think about Illinois summers, it's pretty hot and humid. So hardiness zone wise, Southern Illinois may be fine. It's probably not going to be particularly happy because of those hot, humid conditions that we get. Again, because this is an evergreen, we want to protect from winter wind, from desiccation. If we are going to try growing it in Illinois, probably some afternoon shade, help with that heat a little bit, especially during the summers. And it grows as a tree, a pyramidal shape, and get 30 to 50 feet tall in cultivation, sometimes up to 80 feet in more natural settings and really old plants. We do get typically red berries, but there are cultivars that are orange or yellow berried plants that are out there, the variegated leaves and stuff. And this is one because it likes those, we need that higher hardiness zones of 7 to 9, but cooler summers. It's more of a Pacific Northwest. It does well in. It's naturalized in some of those areas, and in some places it's considered invasive because it does so well in some of those conditions. So you could grow it here, but it may struggle a little bit, especially during the summers.
Well, but Ken, we have a perfect alternative to the English holly. Um, I think it looks even better than the English holly, the American holly or Ilex opaca. Um, that it is also a tree. It is native-ish to Illinois. Again, Southern Illinois. I saw these trees before quite often. I don't think I've ever seen an American holly growing in central Illinois, at least wild. Maybe intentionally planted, but never wild. So maybe we'll double check those USDA range maps, but I'm pretty sure I don't think it was found in central Illinois. But now I think you could definitely grow it here with you. You're zone 6, right, Ken? Is that where you're at right now?
Yes, and I think you can go to
Yes.
zone 5 if I remember right.
Yeah,
So
zone 5. But again, you do have to be a little bit careful of that winter desiccation, though. It's just one of the when you're growing some of these broadleaf evergreens at the further furthest north extent of their hardiness zone, you're rolling the dice a little bit with some of those winters. Um, so while it can survive that zone 5 winter, what if we get a few polar vortexes that winter? That could really just it could kill the plant outright or really knock out any active buds where it just looks pretty lousy for the rest of its life or for at least a few years. But American holly has those very traditional holly looking leaves, big evergreen tree, red berries, and it is a beast to be able to maintain. So hollies do shed leaves, they're evergreen, but they'll often shed a lot of their interior leaves like in the spring once those berries start, or sorry, not berries, once the drupes start to develop. You'll see some leaf drop in the interior of the plant. Now, I have had to do some maintenance underneath a holly before. They wanted those leaves raked up and removed. And I will say that is not a job for the barehanded. You need gloves. Even with gloves, I would like pull my hands up and just holly leaves would be stuck in my hands. And so something to be mindful of. I thought it was a great idea if we would have just left the leaves there. Um, they weren't hurting anything, and they were doing a great job at controlling the weeds. Um, but American holly, very adaptable. I do recall this one growing right outside the ag building where I went to school in Carbondale, and so just a a delightful tree to have in the landscape, and that just a massive evergreen color in a stark winter landscape. What more could you ask for?
Yeah, and there are cultivars of this one too. They have more a little bit upright, more upright growth, a little narrower. There are some that have different colored berries or drupes on them as well. So more bushy. So again, there's some variation out there if you look. I'm not sure how easy it is to find some of these cultivars, but they're out there, maybe,
Mhm.
possibly. And I did check the bone app for American holly, and it is native to far southern Illinois. There's a
Yeah.
couple, well, one county that's yellow, so present but rare.
That's that's what I figured, but yeah, we're you know, us in central Illinois, we can probably grow it. Um, you're up a little bit farther northern than Illinois, you could probably still have it survive, but I'd worry about desiccation once we get into those really cold winter conditions. Well, Ken, one holly, I don't know if we do have it on the list, but we have it on the list as like named cultivars, and that is Ilex cornuta. That's the Chinese holly, and that is what I think I have growing in my yard. Um, I didn't plant this one. Like I said, this thing is planted as kind of a baffle to the air conditioner, like a visual barrier. Um, and it is not the prettiest plant. And it's one of those where I'm like, initially we moved into the house and I said, we're cutting this thing down, we're getting rid of it, it's ugly. But I recommend this to everyone. We just sat on it. We sat on the whole landscape. Just wait to see, let the landscape reveal itself to you for about a year. And I remember sitting there in the living room watching this holly with its red berries in the middle of winter. And I saw these robins, I saw cardinals, I saw all these birds in this plant using it as shelter and food. Um, and so after I saw that, I'm like, ooh, I kind of like this shrub. And so now it has become something that I prune, something that I manage. Um, with maybe in the future, I will dig it up and move it somewhere, but I think it's been in there in that spot since the house was built in the 70s. So it's going to be quite the task to move. But it has red berries, as you can see here in the video. Um, and I don't know where the male is. So it might be one of the name cultivars that we have here on our list, Ken. Um, I'm thinking it's the second one, but let's start with the first one. The first one is Nellie Stevens. This one is more like a southern US plant. So if you're listening and you live in a very hot part of the world, this might be the holly for you. It's very tolerant of that summer heat weather. Um, so it's a hybrid of Ilex aquifolium and Ilex cornuta, the Chinese holly. Gets up to 30 foot tall. If it's in a happy place, 20 foot, 25 foot wide. Um, and it is a heavy producer of berries. Um, you can grow this in the full sun, part shade. Uh, as Ken mentioned, it is a good idea to protect these from the afternoon sun if we can, especially if we're in the southern part of the U.S. Likes acidic soil, but really can go anywhere from like heavy clay, um, but probably not like rain garden sites. Um, yeah, just is very heat tolerant, and the form of it is kind of Christmas tree shaped, pyramidal or pyramidal, however you want to pronounce that. I always pronounce it pyramidal, and then I've been corrected multiple times. It's pyramidal, but how do you say it, Ken?
I've always heard pyramidal.
Well, who is saying
Who are you,
pyramidal?
who are you hanging out with?
I don't know.
Or maybe I'm hanging out with the wrong people.
Well, we both are then. Well, as we hang out together, we keep doing that, we'll be fine. Um, so yeah, the you have the female plant, but it can produce some fruits without a male pollinizer. Um, and mine doesn't produce that many red berries, not as many as you would see in like a nursery catalog, those branches are just overburdened with berries. Mine are scattered throughout. So possibly I am growing a Nellie Stevens. I don't know. It could be a
You
possibility.
need to get yourself an Edward J. Stevens.
Uh, is that the pollinizer,
That's the
Edward?
male. Yes.
Someone, can you get an Edward in here, please? Um, that's the other interesting thing. So I don't have as far as I know, there's no male hollies near my plant. Growing up, we had the Winterberry, and there were no male hollies around. I wonder if other people have encountered that. You have that holly, you have that one holly, it's female because it gets the berries, but where's the male? I don't know. I have a mystery male holly lurking around the corner somewhere.
Say that or you just overlook it. Like those winter berries, I think that'd be pretty
Yes,
easy to overlook
yes,
because the
yes.
males are pretty, at least mine is pretty nondescript. It's just a random shrub,
Hmm.
more or less.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and all of our attention is drawn to those red berries in the winter, so we wouldn't even think to look for that other plant. No. But Ken, there is, these plants aren't reading the books. There is this next one. It is the Burford holly, and I do wonder if mine is somewhat related to that Burford holly, because it does not require the male at all to produce berries. It is a bred from the Ilex cornuta, so it is a Chinese holly. Grows anywhere from 5 to 25 foot tall, depending on your cultivar that you've got. 8 to 15 foot wide. A lot of it matches with what I'm growing, but I'm not sure. It's one of those.
Get out you can borrow my book. It's got a whole section on identification.
Oh, excellent.
A giant.
All right.
That's most of the book, talking about the different species.
Well, then, so Ken and I were planning a meetup here this week, so there's a lot of things we have to exchange. And now it's a holly book on top of it. So, well, very cool, very cool. Well, we really just kind of skim the surface of the different types of hollies out there. Those are going to be the ones that you probably find more often in the garden center. But before we like close this out, there's also this whole other side that we maybe touched on here and there, and that's its beneficial impact for wildlife. So, Ken, um, you know, are these good for the wild things out there?
Yeah, so they're blooming plants. So we're going to have pollinators visiting them. We have those floral resources, the pollen and the nectar, available for those in a lot of times in the spring. There are different species of butterflies and moths that will host plants. Different ilex species are host plants. For those, probably more of our native species are going to be a little more impactful for that than some of the non-native stuff. And like you mentioned with the birds and stuff, habitat for that, a food source. I will say, and I think for some of the hollies and winterberry, this may be the case for. Sometimes they need to go through a few freezes before they become a little more palatable to birds and wildlife and stuff. I would say our winter berries stick around for a very long time. Oftentimes in the spring, they are still on the plant. So I don't know how much that gets eaten by the birds during the winter. It's in our front yard, so we don't really look out there all that often. I need to move it somewhere where I can actually observe them a little more often to see how often birds visit those plants. But they will feed on those berries, those drupes, whatever you want to
Mhm.
call them, as well.
Yeah. I've noted a lot of the foraging of the berries happens like mid to late winter. That's when I say I see a lot of it, especially when we get sort of that really extreme freezing conditions, really cold conditions. The birds they'll be using for shelter. I'll watch them pop a couple bear droops in their mouths. Um, we're going to be saying it right by the end of the show, right? Um, so you get a nice long season, like winter season, with those berries for that color, and then that benefit of the wildlife food source.
Yeah, they're not necessarily picked clean right away, so you do get to enjoy them for a while. And I have read, I don't, I'm assuming it's true. that the yellow and orange ones are eaten after the red ones a lot of times. So they'll go after the red and then yellow and orange. Less preferable for whatever reason, but those tend to stick
Mhm.
around a little bit longer in the landscape.
Mhm. And remember, humans do not eat
Going,
those drupes. Yeah, I mean, birds can, but birds also eat poison ivy berries. So just just keep that in mind. They got a tougher gut than you and I.
yes. But you can consume, like you mentioned, some hollies. So
Yes.
for you, the
What do you got,
viewers,
Ken?
I'm going to sacrifice. I have made no secret of my disdain for tea, but there are a couple of teas that you can buy that are made from holly. So one is the Yapan, how are you going to say that? The Vomitoria.
Mm,
That is Ilex Vomitoria. That is a tea that indigenous peoples would create. And it was given the name Vomitoria because I'm trying to remember. Hopefully, I'm getting this. I'm remembering the story right. Is that they would drink a lot of this and a lot of times vomit. But it's not necessarily the tea itself. It's not making you vomit. It's just I think the amount they were consuming and some of the other activities and stuff. But I was given the name vomitoria because uh, settlers and Europeans thought that that was the cause of their vomiting. So that is a tea um, you can make, and there's also yerba mate, which is a tea, an ilex species that is native to South America. That is also the leaves are also used to make a tea, and it's quite popular in some countries down in South America. I think Argentina being one of them. So, since last week was Thanksgiving, I got some of these teas and I subjected my family to taste testing those. And I will say a good chunk of my family does not like tea, but there are some that do. So, um, the yerba mate, this is I guess you would call it a loose leaf tea. It's just kind of loose in the bag. So it's when you make it, at least the stuff I bought, it's kind of a dirty looking tea, kind of like pond water, which I know doesn't sound all that appetizing. And to be honest with you, I don't think it tastes much better. No, I'm not doing a good job of selling this, but I will.
hmm.
Still not good, even cold.
Even as iced yappen tea, it's still not good.
It's not quite as bad. So to me, it tastes. And again, I don't like tea. I don't drink coffee, but to me, it tastes kind of like a mix of tea and coffee. It's got a real bitterness to it. The smell is not particularly pleasant, so it may not be welcome in South America after this. Um, but it kind of a grassy, wet grass smell, and so several of my family members described it as that as well. I don't think if I give them something to drink, they may not
Hmm.
take that anymore from me after drinking this. So there's a lot of gagging,
Okay.
even from the
Yes.
tea, even the people that drink tea, they didn't like it either. So
Ah,
maybe
so
in
Ken, you do have some direct quotes though from your
yes,
study over the holiday
I
week.
do. So my wife was taking notes for me as I was subjecting people to this. So I will. I'll start with my wife. She does drink tea. She drinks black tea. She says it has a bitter taste, smells like a wet leaf pile. My son, who drinks green tea, tastes and smells like decomposed leaves. And this could be on the maker as well. I'm not going to absolve myself from all fault here. One of my sisters, dirt smells like wet grass after mowing, and it started breaking down. Then 5 minutes later, the taste is still in my mouth, like warmed up garbage. So let's see here. I think my mother-in-law tried some. She drinks tea. She says it smells like soup or beef broth. Tastes like a cup of like a tea, but gross. So tea drinkers, like one of my brother's tea with a hint of compost. Not good. Really sits on your tongue. Uh, my sister-in-law's when you breathe in, it won't go away.
Wow.
So, and we even added I didn't do this for everyone. We added a tablespoon of sugar to a cup, and it still was not Still was not a very popular drink. So
Mhm.
somebody said, I don't want to play this game anymore after drinking it.
Oh no.
And then the Yapan, which is our native tea. This one does come in tea bags, so this it's a much cleaner looking drink, which is because it's probably in this fine mesh, whereas I was just put the other stuff in water and poured it through a strainer, so I didn't get all the dust and stuff out. But this one is much more palatable. Um,
Still not a tea
so
drinker
still
though.
still tastes like grass to me. But it's a clearer color. I think what you would typically think of tea, kind of a green tea and stuff. So my wife, again, black tea drinker, smells like wet leaves, but not as strong. Uh, tastes like regular black tea, not bitter. Smells better. For my sister, actually tastes like tea. The other sister who thought the other stuff was absolutely disgusting, smells like leaves, not as bad. Still leafy. My son who drinks green tea said it tastes like green tea. So some other people kind of bland, tastes like regular tea. So
Hmm.
maybe a better option. But it also could be the way it was prepared. So if you're really into tea or holly, go get yourself some holly
Some
tea.
Molly tea, baby. I love that. Well, I think if any listeners or watchers have any other ideas of what we can subject Ken's family to next Thanksgiving, give us some ideas. Uh, what new things are you gonna put on their plates or in their cups?
I may
Um,
not be invited back.
mhm. You know, I did read that indigenous folks, and then also early colonizers, and then Confederates, when the Union had blockaded a lot of their supply movements, used holly in a lot of different things. And there are parts of the plant that are good as laxative. There are parts of the plant that are good as a anti-diarrheal. Um, but I don't think you want to get those mixed up if you're trying to treat one symptom and you just make it worse. So, um, yeah, I think there's definitely that world of medicinal use of plants, and this particular our native hollies have certainly played a role in that. Um, but we at Extension, or at least the horticultural arm of Extension, we don't talk about that side. We don't do those recommendations because we only think about plant health and not people health.
Yes. So I would say if you're going to be brewing the tea, buy it. Don't make it yourself. And if I remember right, the Yapan plant, the tea, is one of only a couple plants native to the U.S. that produces caffeine. So there is
Mhm.
caffeine in there.
Yep.
So if I start shaking, get all jittery, you know why.
Yes. Ken's Ken's hooked on yapping. Oh, well, Ken, hey, you know what? There's one more selling point for these plants. You know what that is?
What?
Deer.
Deer.
It's
Yes.
deer. Deer don't like them. Well, I'm sure deer will nibble on them, but they, hollies will um, kind of resist or tolerate deer browsing. So, yeah, that just another reason to incorporate more hollies in our landscaping.
Wonder how bad rabbits are.
Yes, because they're thin bark, like they're smooth bark. It would be something I would think a rabbit would want to nibble on in a wintry day. I don't know.
And I've eaten mine, but I don't have a big rabbit problem either. So
I have quite a few, so I'll plant some and let you know. Well, that was a lot of great information about the wonderful world of hollies. So now we can deck our halls with boughs of hollies of all different shapes, sizes, types, evergreen, deciduous with berries. So also the Winterberry holly, just thought of this, that is a main ingredient in a lot of those pot decorations that you see this time of year as well. People will take cuttings off of those and use it to stick in pots and decorate their front porches and stuff with. So, Lots of uses for these guys during the holiday season.
I don't think we ever defined what a bow is. We teased
Oh,
it.
we didn't. Oh, we did tease it. And listeners, viewers, you've had to wait till the very end.
It was planned.
It was totally planned. So as a kid, I had no idea what that song was about. What are they talking about? A bow? What's a bow?
I always thought it was like a ball
Yeah, yeah, like a garland, like a piece of garland or a swag. Yeah. Hmm.
branch. Yep.
Yep. Hmm. Yeah. So there you go. No need to Google it. We're the authorities on bows.
You waited this long.
That's right. All right. Well, the Good Growing Podcast, a production of University of Illinois Extension, edited this week by Ken Johnson. And Ken, thanks so much for hanging out this week on this snowy day and talking about, I think, one of my maybe top 5 favorite groups of plants, holly. I want more now.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to find some more places to put some Winterberry now that we're kind of landscaping our entire front yard. The ones we have now are going to get kind of hidden, so I'm going to have to move them or get some more.
Yeah,
probably more.
Get more.
Yes. Yes, and thank you as always, and let's do this again next week.
Oh, we shall do this again next week. We're going to be chatting with Nick Frillman about persimmons. I've never gotten a good one. They've always tricked me and robbed my mouth of saliva. But he's going to tell us, hopefully, how we can find the right one to eat. Well, listeners, thank you for doing what you do best, and that is listening. Or if you watched us on YouTube, watching. And as always, keep on growing.